All right, so let's dive into this New Jersey drone thing. It's pretty wild, right? I know you guys have sent us so many articles about this. Clearly, you're as fascinated as we are. So basically, since like mid-November, there have been all these drones spotted in New Jersey, like at least 10 counties. And it's mostly at night, which is kind of creepy. And they're often seen over these like reservoirs, power lines, even military bases. I mean, come on. It's enough to make anyone a little paranoid. Especially with all these videos online, we've got some good articles from NPR and CBS Philadelphia. They lay out like all the basic facts. And then we've even got a piece from Fox News, which throws in a bit of a more, let's just say, interesting theory.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. So we're going to break down everything we know, what officials are saying, and what it all means.
Yeah. You know what I find really fascinating about this? Is that these drones seem to be targeting, like, critical infrastructure. It's not just some random person messing around with their new toy. This seems pretty deliberate. And that's a whole other level of concerning.
Yeah, totally. Like the NPR article mentioned this U.S. Army base in Morris County. They've had like 11 drone sightings. And some of them were even after the FAA put restrictions on flights in that area. So that's not just some hobbyist out for a joyride, right? I mean, if they can fly over a military base with restrictions, that's some serious stuff. So why are these locations so sensitive? And like, what kind of vulnerabilities are we talking about here?
Well, think about it. These are the systems that keep everything running, like our electricity, our water, our transportation. If those systems get disrupted, I mean, it could cause chaos, even put lives at risk. And the fact that they're hitting these specific spots, it suggests some serious planning and knowledge. This is way beyond a prank.
Right. It does seem like the authorities are taking it kind of seriously. Governor Murphy has at least acknowledged the sightings. He even mentioned there were like 49 reports just on December 8th. So some of those could be duplicates. But he says he's, quote, monitoring the situation, unquote, and working with federal partners. But so far, there's no clear answer on who's behind it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to figure there are probably a ton of different agencies involved in this, local police, state agencies, the FAA, maybe even the military and intelligence communities. Getting everyone on the same page takes time.
Yeah, but in the meantime, we got Governor Murphy saying there's no known threat. But then you have the police chief of Florham Park calling the drones nefarious in nature. Like, that's a pretty big difference in tone, right?
Yeah.
And you got Congressman Chris Smith calling it a very serious threat at a House hearing.
So if I lived in New Jersey right now, I think I'd be pretty freaked out with all these mixed messages. What do you think? How long can people handle this uncertainty before they demand some real action?
That's a good question. It's like a ticking clock. How long until people lose patience? And Senator Cory Booker is already pushing for more transparency from the FBI. He's worried about rumors and misinformation spreading, which is understandable.
Makes sense. Speaking of the FBI, seems like we can probably rule out one theory about the drones coming from that military research base nearby. Pigsney Arsenal. Oh, yeah. The base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Craig Bonham II, he straight up denied any involvement, said the drones aren't theirs. Now, of course, you know, a denial doesn't always equal the truth. But for now, let's assume they're not involved.
Right, so if it's not the military, then who is it? Well, the FBI is officially investigating. But even they're saying they're still trying to figure things out.
Yeah. Robert Wheeler, he's assistant director of the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group. He testified before Congress. And he couldn't even say for sure if it's one person or a group. And he couldn't rule out a threat to public safety or national security either. I mean, it's early in the investigation, of course. But it's not exactly reassuring.
Not at all. And the FBI is also asking the public for help. But they're being very specific. They're telling people to only report drone sightings that seem dangerous, not just any drone activity. What do you think that means? Do they know something we don't? Like, maybe they have some idea what some of these drones are up to, and they just need help pinpointing the really bad ones?
Yeah. Maybe. It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely makes you wonder. So before we get into all the crazy theories floating around, we should probably address the big one, the mothership theory.
Oh, yeah. The Iranian mothership theory.
Yeah.
Now things are getting interesting.
Okay, so Congressman Jeff Andrew, he's claiming he has info from these very high qualified, reliable sources, but he won't name them. And he says that Iran is behind these drones, that they launched this mothership like a month ago, and it's just sitting off the coast of the U.S., launching these drones for who knows what reason.
Wait, hold on. A mothership full of drones off the coast of New Jersey? What does he even mean by mothership?
Well, it sounds pretty dramatic, right? But basically he's saying there's this big ship out there that can launch and control all these drones. However, the Pentagon has flat out denied this. Their spokesperson, Sabrina Singh, said there is no Iranian ship off the coast of the United States. So now we've got one congressman's word against the Pentagon's.
Wow. So how are we supposed to figure out who to believe? What are the red flags we should be looking out for?
That's a really important question, especially nowadays with so much information flying around. So when you see these big claims like this, especially with such serious implications, you got to ask yourself some questions. First, who's the source? Are they reliable? What evidence are they giving? Are there other credible sources backing them up? And just as importantly, does the claim itself even make sense? Does it fit with what we know about the people involved, their capabilities, their motives? So in this case, we need to look at Congressman Vandrew's track record and ask ourselves, does Iran really have the technology and the reason to do something like this?
It's a good reminder to not take everything at face value,
Mhm.
especially with something this sensitive. We need to think critically and really examine the information we're getting.
Absolutely. And this whole situation really brings up a bigger point. Regardless of who's behind these drones, they're exploiting a vulnerability that we need to address. The fact that someone can fly these things near critical infrastructure
Right.
for weeks undetected, that raises some serious questions about our security.
Yeah, it's a little scary. And it's not just a New Jersey problem either. Remember that Wall Street Journal article we talked about? The drones over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia? They were there for 17 days. 17 days. And nobody seemed to notice. So this isn't just one state or even one type of target. This is a nationwide problem, maybe even global.
You're right. This incident is a wake-up call. Drones are a new kind of threat, and we need to adapt our thinking and our strategies.
Wow, okay. That's a lot to take in. I think we need a break to let this all sink in. But when we come back, we'll explore the implications of all this and what it means for the future of drones and our security. So stick around. All right, we're back, and wow, there's a lot to unpack here. Like, it's one thing to see drones in a movie,
Mm-hmm.
but to think about them actually out there, watching our power plants and military bases and stuff, it's pretty creepy.
Yeah, it really makes you think about security in a whole new way. We're so used to worrying about traditional threats, armies, missiles, that kind of thing. But this is something totally different.
Like those drones over Langley Air Force Base. They were there for 17 days. 17 days. And nobody knew. What does that tell us about our defenses?
Well, it shows a big gap in our systems. Our current radar, the kind designed to find big planes, it's not very good at spotting these small, slow-moving drones. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is constantly changing.
Oh, wow. So we're basically blind to these things, or at least partially blind. So what can we do about it? Are we just sitting ducks?
Not necessarily. There's a lot of new tech being developed to tackle this. Like some systems use advanced radar, specifically designed to pick up on those unique drone characteristics. And then there are counter-drone systems, which can jam their signals or even physically intercept them.
So like lasers and drone catching nets. Is that what airport security is going to look like in the future?
Haha, maybe. Some of that stuff is closer than you think. But technology is only part of the solution. We also need to think about regulation and accountability. Right now, anyone can buy a drone and fly it pretty much wherever they want. We need stricter rules, maybe registration licensing, even equipping drones with transponders so we know who owns them and where they are.
Right. So if we know who's flying it and where it's supposed to be, it's easier to spot the ones breaking the rules. Like if someone's flying a drone around a power plant at 3 a.m., that's a pretty big red flag.
Exactly. It's about creating transparency and holding people responsible. But this can't just be on the government. The companies that make and sell drones, they have a responsibility too. They need to prioritize security in their designs, be upfront about what their drones can do, and work with the authorities to prevent misuse.
That makes sense. It sounds like we're just at the beginning of a very complex conversation here. While the government figures things out on their end, what can regular people do to stay safe? Or just feel more informed about all this?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is awareness. If you see a drone somewhere it shouldn't be, like near critical infrastructure, or flying erratically, especially at night, don't just ignore it. Pay attention to details like its size, shape, any markings or lights. If something feels off, report it to the authorities.
So like that FBI tip line we talked about.
Exactly. And beyond that, stay informed. Read articles from reliable sources. Keep up with developments in drone technology. And talk about these issues with other people. The more we understand about drones, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this new reality.
Knowledge is power.
Right.
But it's kind of crazy to realize how much technology is changing everything, often in ways we don't even fully understand. And you're right there on the front lines of it all. What got you interested in drones in the first place?
Well, it started with a fascination with flight, I guess, like a lot of kids. But as I learned more about drones, I got really intrigued by their potential. They can be used for so many amazing things, delivering packages, inspecting bridges, helping with search and rescue. But with that potential comes a lot of responsibility. And that's what drives me now, making sure we're using this technology for good and minimizing the risks.
That's a perspective we definitely need more of.
Yeah, it's not about being afraid of technology. It's about understanding it and shaping how it's used.
Yeah,
And with drones, that conversation needs to happen now.
totally agree.
This isn't just a tech problem, it's a societal problem. We need to decide what kind of world we want to live in, what role we want technology to play, and what limits we need to set.
This is getting pretty deep, but it's important, right? We can't just ignore these issues.
Exactly. And it's only going to get more important as drones become more advanced. What we're seeing now with the New Jersey sightings and Langley, it's just the beginning. We're entering a new era, and we need to be ready.
Okay, so drones are here to stay, and we need to figure out how to live with them safely and responsibly. But what about this mystery itself? Do you think we'll ever find out for sure who's behind these New Jersey drones?
It's hard to say. These investigations can take a long time, and sometimes you never get a clear answer. But I'm hopeful the FBI will figure it out. And even if they don't, the investigation itself can teach us a lot about these new kinds of threats and how to protect ourselves.
That's a good point. Sometimes the search for answers is just as important as the answers themselves.
Absolutely. And in this case, that search is taking us down a fascinating path. It's a little unnerving at times, but we're exploring the intersection of technology security and the future of our airspace.
Yeah, it's a journey that takes some courage, wouldn't you say? Facing the unknown, questioning what we think we know, and adapting to a world that's constantly changing.
Definitely. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all this, but I think if we have open conversations, if we ask the right questions, and
Yeah.
stay curious, we can navigate this new landscape and shape it for the better.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot in this part of our dive. We talked about the vulnerabilities these drones expose, the new tech being developed to counter them, and the importance of individual awareness and responsible use. But before we wrap up this episode, we need to look at some potential scenarios for how this might play out and what it could mean for the future of drones and drone regulations. We'll dig into those possibilities when we come back for the final part of our deep dive. So stay with us. All right, so we're back for the final part of our drone deep dive. We've talked about the facts, the theories, the whole shebang. Now, I want to put on our detective hats for a minute. If you were leading this investigation, where would you even start?
That's a good question. I think the first thing I'd do is try to build a really solid timeline of all the sightings, like a map of when and where these drones have been popping up. Maybe we start to see a pattern, certain routes, certain types of infrastructure being targeted more than others. The more data we have, the better chance we have of understanding what's going on.
So connecting the dots, seeing if a bigger picture emerges. But let's say we've got our timeline and we are seeing some patterns. What then?
Well, then I'd want to figure out exactly what kind of technology we're dealing with. How big are these drones? How high can they fly? How long can they stay up? What kind of equipment could they be carrying? Cameras, jamming devices, maybe even something more dangerous. Knowing those capabilities could narrow down the suspects and give us a better idea of the threat level.
Right, so it's like a tech puzzle, figuring out the specs of these mystery machines. Speaking of suspects, do you think it's more likely one person or a group? Like a lone wolf versus a whole organized operation?
It's tough to say. There are arguments for both. I mean, the scale of this, the coordination, hitting all these different locations, avoiding detection, that points to some level of organization. But then again, there haven't been any demands or messages or anything. No communication at all, which could suggest a lone wolf, maybe someone with a grudge or just wants to cause chaos.
So it could be a disgruntled employee or an activist or even just some techie messing around. A lot of possibilities.
Yeah, and we can't completely rule out foreign involvement either. Even though the Pentagon denied that mothership theory, state actors definitely have the resources and the motivation for this kind of thing. You know, gathering intel on critical infrastructure, maybe even prepping for future attacks.
Whoa, okay. So is this just the tip of the iceberg? Are we going to see more of this? Drones being used for spying sabotage?
It's definitely a concern. And no matter how this investigation turns out, it's clear that we've got a vulnerability here. We can't wait for something worse to happen before we act.
So what needs to change? What does a secure future with all these drones look like?
Well, we need a multi-pronged approach. First, better detection tech. Systems that can reliably find and track drones and tell them apart from other aircraft, maybe new radar systems, AI-powered analysis, even counter-drone systems that can disable them.
So basically upping our tech game. But that's not all, is it?
Nope, tech alone isn't enough. We need smarter regulations and enforcement, too. Mandatory registration licensing for operators, maybe even geofencing to block drones from restricted areas. We got to find a way to allow the good uses of drones, like deliveries and agriculture and filmmaking, but also prevent the bad stuff.
Right. So finding that balance, encouraging innovation, but keeping things safe.
Exactly. And this isn't just a problem for one country to solve. We need international cooperation on this, sharing info, developing technologies, setting global standards.
That makes sense. So we've talked about the government, the tech. But what about us regular folks? Is there anything we can do?
Definitely. First, just be aware. Learn about drones, pay attention to your surroundings, report anything suspicious. Knowledge is power.
So keep an eye on the sky during those late night dog walks.
Exactly. And stay informed. Follow the news, talk about these issues, advocate for better policies.
So we need to become more drone literate as a society. Not just about the tech, but the bigger picture.
I like that drone literate.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more we understand, the better equipped we'll be to deal with this.
Well, this has been a pretty intense deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, but hopefully you've learned something new and maybe even a little bit freaked out. But that's okay because the drone era is here and it's up to all of us to make sure it's a safe and responsible one. So keep those eyes on the sky. And if you see something strange, don't be afraid to report it. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring.